I don't know about y'all, but I'm glad that we have talented musicians who gather midweek to practice and gather here really early on a Sunday morning. They're here normally on Sundays before most of us are here and before perhaps some of you are even awake. And I wonder how many of y'all have experienced that feeling that by the time you pull onto the church property, you're completely exhausted? Anybody? Come on. Yes? Hallelujah. I see those hands. Okay. It is interesting sometimes to be in the role that I get to be in, and whether it's a Sunday morning or I mentioned Wednesday nights. Wednesday nights here at the church can be a fascinating time. I know our campus right now, like you can't get anywhere from here, and you can't get here from anywhere. So part of it, you may have gotten into this room this morning and thought like, I'm exhausted because I walked from Egypt to get here, but we're here. So thanks for that. I think about, like on Wednesday nights, there's a place in particular, and before all the construction started, if you know where a lot of things take place, downstairs at the entrance to Trinity Hall, that's a place where a lot of times as our kids' choirs start going, and you've got Wednesday night supper, and there's all these activities and various things going on, it's fascinating to stand there and watch the double doors swing open, and the wide variety of just people that walk in, and the various states and stages in which they find themselves at that hour of the day. And it's always fascinating. I like to kind of, this is probably bad. Some of y'all are going to be really like conscious as you come through those doors now. But there are times where, and some of y'all are in the room, that it seems like haggard moms. It's like we should have a separate entrance for haggard moms. Because that is, the double doors swing open sometimes, and it's like, stop it, go up the stairs and sing about Jesus. And ring a handbell, it'll bring you joy. You little mongrel. I mean, it's like, you see this and it's like, I'm going to go eat a lot. And I hope there's banana pudding, I mean, it is a place where you sit there and, to people watch, it's fascinating because I see in that moment, it's like, wow, some of you guys are exhausted. How many of y'all have been to Disney World? Happiest place on earth, right? How many of y'all have ever people watched at Disney World at about 4 p.m.? I don't know what Brother Walt did, but he programmed into the DNA of the place somewhere between 3 and 4, a weird switch gets flipped, and instead of the happiest place on earth, it becomes the least happy place on earth. I mean, it is amazing. I remember Erica, my wife, is from Central Florida, so when we were dating, I would find myself down there. We went to Disney a number of times, just ourselves, and I can remember, going in and seeing all these families and think, wow, what a magical, mystical world this is, how incredible. And we would stay all day, and it would get to that witching hour of between 3 and 4, and you would just see, it looked kind of similar to downstairs, You got the kid with the Mickey hat half on and like ice cream smeared all over their face, and somebody's wearing a blinky, sparkly thing, and you got mom and dad that are just like, and they're headed toward the entrance, and you got one that's in tow that's in the little, stroller that's the size of a small state, that they're pushing. And they just look miserable. And I remember in those moments where we were dating, I would think, oh, golly, those poor kids. And then I got older and had kids and got to experience that time of day in that most magical place. And something in me shifted to thinking those poor, poor parents. And how different. It's a place that sometimes highlights the value and the power of rest. Because I know sometimes when I've gone to that place, man, those sorts of vacations are the ones where you come back and you need a vacation from your vacation. You know what I mean? And it just is one of those things that reminds me, sometimes even really good things in our lives can really drain us. And we just can let ourselves get so stripped down and so torn down, even by sometimes good things, that we just go, oh, I've given all I've got. I don't have any more. You ever feel that way? Whew. Maybe sometimes you've even felt that way in Disney World. But we don't live there, right? We live in this normal life that we live. And even good things in our lives can have that impact of just stripping us down and stripping away parts of us. And we become exhausted and drained and maybe not feeling like we have anything else to give. This Sunday, kind of in the season of our church year, but in many of your lives, it has this feeling of it's a kickoff and there's new starts and all sorts of new things and new classes and new schools and new principles and new responsibilities and new routines and new traffic patterns everywhere and all sorts of new. But there's a lot of anxiety that can go with all that newness. It's a time where we may have just come through the summer, and some of us may feel like, good grief, people talk about the summer like get some rest. I need some rest for my time of rest. Because I see people at the end of the summer and they're like, sometimes I'm one of them. I can't wait to get back into some predictable routine where it doesn't just feel like we're being pulled in 6 or 8 different directions or uncertain of any of them. And all this fear and anxiety on the horizon, we don't know what that's going to look like. So some of y'all this morning may come into the room and you're in the midst of new beginnings. I see a lot of students. I see a lot of parents of students. I see grandparents in the room. I see aunts and uncles. I see friends and brothers. And in this pattern of new, even good things can leave us exhausted and feeling dry and feeling worn down and feeling like we just want some rest. And I have good news, because Jesus knows our need. Jesus knows your need. And this morning we turn to a scripture that seems so simple, but sometimes is so not. Does it frustrate you ever that you hear some of the teachings of Jesus and you think that's so simple? Why don't I do that? I see it in myself so often. Jesus, if I would just listen to you, you show me the way that I should go. You show me the ways that we should be if I would just listen and obey. So this morning, we have just a few verses from the end of chapter 11 in the Gospel of Matthew. It says this is Jesus saying, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you" what? Rest. Say it again, slower. I will give you rest. I'm not going to ask you to say it slower than that. It gets awkward. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. I know I'm changing the inflection in my voice because to me that's important when I hear him saying this. This isn't a Jesus that is sort of demonstratively saying, you come to me right now, find rest, sit down, do what I say. Do you hear the difference in Jesus saying, take my yoke upon you and just learn from me. I'm gentle. I'm humble in heart. Can you imagine Jesus saying that to you speedily and forcefully? I am gentle and humble in heart. I'm gentle. I'm humble. Are you tired? I'm gentle. I'm humble in heart. And he says, you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This 11th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, if you went back 20-something verses, you would see these men approaching Jesus, and these men are disciples of John. And they come and they kind of confront Jesus and they say, are you the one John's been telling us about? He's been telling us about a Messiah and we're kind of anxious about it, and we're following John, but he's always pointing us to the one that we haven't seen yet. And so there's all this newness that's to come, and we think it's a good thing, but we're kind of exhausted from it, kind of tired, and we're looking for it, and we're looking for it, and we want to find meaning, and we want the good thing, and we want the fulfillment. So they say, Jesus, is it you? And it's fascinating to me that that's the way this chapter begins, with this voiced anxiety, and we want to reach out, we want to find you. Are you the one? So John's been telling us, is this the end of our search? And the end of this chapter, after they confront Jesus on that, we see Jesus saying, come to me and find rest. Filled with anxiety, are you? Find your rest. Come to me. Are you filled with worry? Come to me and find rest. Are you filled with uncertainty and concern for your future? Come to me and find rest. Jesus says something that's pretty interesting in terms of what we do about that. He uses this phrase. He says, come to me and take my what upon you? Take my yoke upon you. Y-O-K-E. Not something that we tend to use a whole lot. The immediate image that might come to your mind is farm animals, work animals, putting a yoke on a beast of burden, so to speak, something that is going to plow the field together, and you yoke them to this big, heavy, weighted thing that's a shackle. And that may be our image. And I've heard sermons about this whole idea of being shackled to Christ in that way. But I want to give you a different idea of what maybe the yoke that Jesus refers to here and how it may be different than those farm animals with that constricted thing around them to keep them tied. Yoke was something that would have been common for people to hear in Jesus' day. Remember, he was Jewish. Jewish teachers are called rabbis. And if you wanted to study under a rabbi and unite yourself to their teaching, they would say, take my yoke upon you. And what that meant was, learn everything about me so that you can mimic it. So take my yoke upon you signified, I desire not just to learn what you have to say, I desire to be like you. I desire to memorize all that you have spoken. I desire to adopt the way that you understand God and how he works in the world and make that my own. I desire to imitate you and all the ways that you relate to people in the world. I want to be like you. And I even want to be like you and have disciples that come after me. So when Jesus says, take my yoke upon you, it is a way of saying, be as I am. Find rest in me as you become more like me. Take all of my understanding of who God is, of what eternity is, of what God's promises to you are. Take that yoke upon you and let it bring you rest. Take the yoke upon you of hearing that you are children of God. Take the yoke upon you that nothing can wash away your sins except for the blood of Jesus. Take that yoke upon you and find rest in that. It wasn't just, I want to learn what you teach. A lot of us in here, we're either in school, or some of us, if school's a long way back, but you went to school, right? And some of you had teachers or professors. They may have been really good, but very few of them, maybe none of them, were so good at what they did that you walked up to them and said, I want your yoke upon me. Instead, most of us approach that moment and we say, I'm going to learn what you have to say, often so I can spit it back out on a test, right? Let's be honest. Come on, students. Hello? Yes? Am I? I'm going to learn what you have to say. It might do me some good later on. But really, how much of us use chemistry every day? Can I get a witness? Careful. Chemical composition of toothpaste, anyone? You used chemistry anyway. I hope you used it this morning. We sit under teachers, but we don't put their yoke upon us, right? Because we're still motivated by ourselves. We want that knowledge so that it will do us some good and we'll make a good grade. And we'll go on to the next thing. Jesus' way of teaching is so different. Take my yoke upon you. Don't just learn what I have to say. Be who I am. Come to find your identity in the Father and his love for you. not in all the other things that bring us anxiety. I mean, good grief. That's part of like a whole new school year, all the anxieties that go into that in terms of, am I going to like my classes? Are my teachers going to be good or horrible? If you're a teacher, what are my classes going to be like? If I change classrooms, do I even know what to do? We've got a new administration. I'm worried about that. Am I going to make grades that are good enough? In this culture, in this bubble where we live in North Fulton, am I going to make like a 4.3 GPA? So that I can get into not just college, but the right college, and they're going to give me a this and a that. Holy moly. And we're just swamped with these expectations and anxieties and desires, and never mind the stuff of like, what if I'm not liked? What if I have these doubts about who I am? What if I look in the mirror and I don't like who I see? What if I worry too much about what others think about? Oh, man. There's so much going on there. And in that, it just breeds fear and anxiety, and we get stripped down and we get stripped down, and we don't experience rest. Jesus says, come to me. Take my yoke upon you. It's easy. It's light. It means being who you were created to be. Living into the image of God that's in all of us. Find rest, he says, for your souls by taking on that yoke. I wonder, just about all of us, maybe all of us, we do have a yoke around our necks. We just may not realize it. We may not have obviously said, I want to take this yoke, but most of us are wearing one, whether we know it or not. And I couldn't help but think, I wonder for a lot of us, if we had the ability to have a film crew follow you around for the next month, but it was completely unknown to you. So completely secretive. You had no idea they were watching every move, every motive, every action, every speech, every interaction. If they followed you around in that way, and then if they had to report back and they had to say, this person is under the yoke of, I wonder what they would say. I wonder about that for me too. It calls into question, does my whole life live out the example of Christ? Are there places where I don't want you guys to see it, but that film crew might say, well, he says he's under the yoke of Jesus, but what about that Tuesday? That wasn't a real Jesus-like day. Whose yoke are you under? Because that's part of the idea. It seems like if Jesus says, come to me and find rest, there's something inferred in that. It seems like he's saying, come to me instead of. Do you get what I mean by that? It seems there's a need to say, you tend to go after these other things in search of rest. Whatever it might be. There's all sorts of things we could list. You want to find rest in this or that or that. And then sometimes we wonder, why don't I feel filled up? Why don't I feel rested? It's like Jesus is saying, instead of those other options, come to me, and I'll give you rest for your soul. Come to me and find deep rest, fulfilling rest. Now, here's part of that. When we hear rest, and I imagine most of y'all at that opening question, when I kind of invited you to say, where do you go or what do you do to kind of just get away and find rest? You probably thought something that related to some physical rest, right? Whole lot of, I would imagine most of us kind of do that. We'll rest. Means this idea of kind of kicking back. And I Googled rest, images for rest. And almost all of the ones that come up have somebody laying back with their feet, like looking out at a lake or something like that, in a hammock or in a nice chair. Is that the only kind of rest Jesus is offering to us? No. Because he says, I'll give you rest for your what? Rest for your soul. I would imagine some of us in the room, even when we get away to rest, we can't turn this off, can we? You struggle with getting away, but then when you're away, you're still thinking about all the things that cause all that anxiety, and it's just hard to find rest. So I got to thinking about what are the ways and where are the places where we get sort of stripped down, where we need rest more than just physically. We do need it physically. Our bodies are a constant reminder that we are not in this shell infinite beings. We don't have infinite stamina physically, do we? We get worn down physically, and when that happens, other parts of us start to wear down too. We need that physical replenishing. The biblical idea of Sabbath in some ways helps us to orient that. Like, take a day to replenish body and soul. We've worked ourselves into this place where so many of us have no understanding of Sabbath anymore. The Sabbath day is only the day where we catch up on all the other work that we didn't get done on the other 6. Y'all feel that way? And that's where sometimes even Sundays, it's like, oh, church becomes part of the checklist that we have to accomplish. And then we got to go grocery shopping, and then we got to mow the grass, and then we've got to do this, and we've got to do, So physically, we need rest. Emotionally, we need rest. Life has lots of ups and downs, doesn't it? And it tears at us. Not always an easy thing to cope with this thing called life. There are some seasons that just seem to tap all of the energy you have, right? Some of y'all may be in a season like that right now. And you just kind of feel like emotionally, I don't have anything else to give. I love the idea of having bank accounts emotionally. And sometimes we get to this place where we are emotionally overdrawn. And we're trying to pay out from a well that's empty. And then people keep pulling at us, right? And we wonder why we snap. We wonder why we get angry. We wonder why we're irritable. Because we haven't found that rest for our souls to fill it back up. Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest. Spiritually, good grief, we get tapped and dried out. Our souls get pulled from to where we just feel like, God, I don't have any rest. My soul doesn't find rest. I don't feel contentment in you. Maybe I've let temptations get in that pull me away from you, and that brings unrest in me because I know God sees those places. Maybe it's a season where you kind of have all these questions of, God, why? And you feel like you're knocking at the door of heaven and it never gets open to you. And you're tired of knocking. Spiritually, we need sometimes to rest and stop knocking and rest and just go, God, I trust that you're here. I trust that you're present. I trust that you're available. Come and be with me. Relationally, you ever find that the relationships in your life, even though some of them are really good, can just draw at you, pull from you, to the place where you just sit down at the end of some days and go, God, I'm just so tired because of all these relationships. And Jesus says, come to me and base those relationships in me and find some rest there. Reorient your value and the value of those relationships through the lens of me. Jesus says, come to me and I'll give you rest. I love this idea partly because it is just a message of hospitality and invitation. It isn't Jesus barking an order. Do this, straighten out your life, give that up, stop doing that. You see, there's options where Jesus could have held us at arm's length, right? Stay away from me until fill in the blank. Until you can, don't come to me. He could hold us at arm's length, but instead he just kind of does this. Think about the difference in posture of someone who does that versus somebody who turns their arms around and does that. Jesus says, come to me. I couldn't help but the posture too of this. That's real inviting, isn't it? I remember in seminary we took a pastoral care class, and they talked about, as pastors, the power of even our physical bodies with people, and I'm aware of it if I'm sitting or talking with someone that sometimes just because it feels like, well, I'm sitting here, and so you'll want to do that, but then that sends a message of I'm not open to you at all. I'm really not listening, and it gives me a more convenient way to glance down at my watch. So this isn't a real open thing. Notice what Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. You will find rest for your soul. So it's like instead of holding his arms like that, he extends his arms like this and he says, come into the circle. Come inside here and find the rest that you're looking for. I'm so visual. And as I was preparing for this week, this idea of take my yoke upon you. It's easy and it's light. Find who you are in me. I thought about times where I've been on a trail, a hiking trail. And there's been times in my own life, but then I probably enjoy it more as an observer. I think about times where maybe it's a 2, 3, 4 mile hike that is, for a person that's a grown up or, a high schooler or whatever, 4 miles, not really a huge deal maybe. But for a toddler, 4 miles is a long way, right? And have you seen, like, on the second half of the trail, somebody coming off the trail looking like this? Coming to the end of the trail, and I've seen and I witnessed it on our trip this summer. I was glad my kids were older because I saw a family and they had 2 young kids and they were only about halfway up a 4 mile climb. And the poor kids, they were like those kids at 4 p.m. at Disney World. I mean, they were just like, one of them was leaned into their mom's kind of hip, and I just heard them, kind of grab, and they were just kind of like, how much further? And then I heard the parents tell that worst of lies, we're almost there. We're almost, and I have this image, maybe you've done it, maybe you've been the one that received it, but I love watching on, and I think about a parent that their kid has just gotten to the end. I don't have any more to give, I'm tired. And I watch what that looks like. And I watch the tenderness of a parent as they kneel down. And what do they do in that moment? A tender parent does not go, suck it up! Right? God gave you 2 legs. It's for right now. A tender parent would say something like what? You're so tired. Come to me. Find what? Rest. Find rest. A loving, tender, gracious parent takes that child and says, come to me. Sit on my shoulder. Find the rest that you crave. And I'll carry you. This morning, it may be that some of you guys sit in here and you say, today's a day where I feel like that little kid at the end of the trail. I'm so tired. Emotionally, relationally, spiritually, maybe physically, I'm so tired. And I want you to hear that this morning, Christ, as a tender parent, says, come to me, find rest, lay on my shoulder, go to sleep on me if you want to. Put your burden on me. You may have been tired for a day. You may have been tired for a month. You may have been worn out for a decade. It's the same Christ that's saying, come to me. He can bear all of that. The band's going to come back, and we're going to finish worship by singing a song that relates so perfectly to what we're talking about here. You may be asking kind of the question that's like, okay, well, come to me and find rest. How do we come to you, Jesus? What does that look like? I have 2 simple things that would encourage you as you leave here. How do you come to Jesus? Well, pray. Talk to him. Another great way to come to Jesus, I said if you take the yoke of a rabbi on you, you memorize what they said and did. Read the Gospel of Matthew. Learn what Jesus said and did. And then here's an example from my life this week. I was midweek, and it was a day where I was kind of like, God, I'm a little mad at you that this is the message for this week. Because I'm tired. I'm exhausted in some ways. And I don't know that I want to get up and preach about feeling exhausted when I'm feeling exhausted. And then God said, precisely. Can you practice what you preach? And I was on midweek. I was on my way here to the church. So I was on my way to work. And I had the radio going and some other stuff. And it kept going through my mind. Jesus said, come to me. Didn't say come to this guy on radio yapping on about stuff. And so I kind of, in that moment behind the wheel, I said, God, I'm going to trust that you know what you're doing. And I don't know exactly how that works, but I'm going to turn off the radio. And I'm going to repeat the words of Jesus, where he said, come to me. And I just kind of, in my own mind and heart, just said, Jesus, I believe that that's true. And I'm tired, and you know that. So I'm coming to you. And you know where my burdens are, and I'm coming to you. And you say a promise that you'll give me rest, and you know I want it. So, Jesus, I'm coming to you. And I pray you grant me rest, because I need it. And I'm coming to you. And I'd love to tell you that, like, all the traffic parted, and I was magically delivered here to the church in like 36 seconds. That didn't happen. Sometimes we want it right now when we want it, right? Did I have a sense of peace through the rest of the day? Yes. Did I have a reassurance that I wasn't the only one in charge? Yes. And then something cool happened. That was on a Wednesday. Thursday was a really fantastic day. And you know what I felt all day on Thursday? Rest. It was like God said, it'll take me a day to pick you up. But tomorrow, you'll feel it and you'll know. I invite you as we sing this song, confess the places in your life where you need rest. You'll hear the lyrics speak to that. And trust that his promise is true for you.